The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council hummed with the gentle murmur of 1,000 diplomatic conversations. Species from across known space gathered beneath its towering luminescent dome, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. The chamber had been designed to impress, with its ancient architecture showcasing the combined artistic brilliance of the founding species. Ornate columns carved from materials found only in the most distant systems supported balconies where observers from member worlds watched the proceedings with keen interest. For nearly 10,000 standard cycles, the Galactic Council had maintained stability across civilized space. It was an achievement that the elder species, those who had evolved on what they proudly called garden worlds, considered their greatest accomplishment. Peace through protocol, power through consensus, and above all, the supremacy of diplomatic resolution over conflict. Today, however, an unmistakable tension permeated the air. The whispered conversations carried tones of concern, even fear. Eyes, sensory stalks, and various perceptual organs continually darted toward the main entrance. They were coming. The Deathworlders. High Commissioner Phalar of the Eldorian species adjusted his ceremonial robes, the shimmering fabric rippling with colors that reflected his unease. As the eldest representative and head of the council, he had witnessed many challenging diplomatic situations, but none quite like this. "Are you certain we must include them in these discussions?" he asked, his melodic voice carrying to his aid a small Xyler named Ziptic. Ziptic's antennae quivered anxiously. "The regulations are clear, High Commissioner. Any threat to multiple council members requires input from all recognized species, regardless of their status." Phalar sighed, a gentle sound like wind through crystal. "Very well. Let's hope their perspective proves valuable rather than disruptive." The massive doors at the chamber's entrance parted, and the conversations throughout the hall dropped to silence, so complete that the subtle humming of environmental systems became suddenly audible. Two figures entered, walking side by side. The human, Ambassador Alara Vance, strode forward with confident, measured steps. She was of average height for her species, which meant she stood shorter than many council members, but taller than others. Her dark formal suit was unadorned except for a small pin bearing Earth's simplified logo, a blue and green circle. Her short gray hair framed a face marked with lines that spoke of experience rather than age, and her eyes, a striking blue, surveyed the room with calm assessment. Beside her walked the Cthar representative, warrior scholar Forlag. Where Vance appeared unassuming, Forlag was impossible to ignore. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, the reptilian being moved with a powerful grace, each step deliberate and controlled. Dark scales covered a muscular frame, broken by ancient scars that told stories of survival. The ceremonial armor he wore was functional rather than decorative, and the crystalline components embedded within it glowed with a dull orange light, a reminder of the silicon-based biology that had evolved on the volcanic hellscape of Cthar Prime. Behind the two primary representatives followed their small delegations. 3 human diplomatic staff and 2 Cthar honor guards, their presence making the contrast between the newcomers and the council members even more stark. As they approached the central podium, whispers erupted again, like a sudden breeze through delicate leaves. Their gravity adaptations alone. One council member murmured, "I heard the Cthar can survive in active lava flows." Another responded, "The humans apparently drink poison for pleasure." Both species routinely expose themselves to radiation for recreational purposes. Ziptic hurried forward, antennae now fully extended in a state of nervous alertness. As the designated liaison officer, it was his duty to greet and guide these dangerous newcomers. "Ambassador Vance, warrior scholar Forlag," he chittered, attempting to keep his voice steady. "Welcome to the Grand Hall. I am Liaison Ziptic, assigned to facilitate your participation in today's emergency session." Vance smiled, the expression warming her features. "Thank you, Liaison Ziptic. The Earth Confederation appreciates being included in these vital discussions." Forlag simply inclined his head, the movement causing light to play across his scales. The Cthar Dominion acknowledges the Council's wisdom in seeking our input, he rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. Before their formal acceptance into the Council 3 standard cycles ago, humans and Cthar had been subjects of intense debate. Both species had evolved on what the Council classified as Deathworlds, planets so hazardous that sentient life should have been impossible. Both had not only survived, but thrived, developing technologies that allowed them to reach the stars despite environments that actively tried to kill them at every turn. It was precisely this background that made them both valuable and terrifying to the established Council members. Species that evolved in paradise rarely understood the concept of existential threat. "If you'll follow me," Ziptic said, "your designated positions are near the central speaking area. The High Commissioner will begin the session shortly." As they followed the small Xyler, Vance glanced at Forlag. "First time in the Grand Hall?" she asked quietly. "Yes," the Cthar replied. "It is excessively ornate. Function sacrificed for appearance." Vance's lips quirked slightly. "They've had 10 millennia of peace to focus on interior decorating. We should be so lucky." "Peace breeds complacency," Forlag observed, his reptilian eyes scanning the room, "and fear of those who know otherwise. Can you blame them? We terrify them just by existing." "Fear has survival value," Forlag replied. "Perhaps they will learn this before it becomes necessary." They took their positions near the center of the chamber, aware of the space that other delegations had left around them, as if proximity itself might be dangerous. Vance and Forlag had met only twice before today's session. Once during a diplomatic reception following their respective species' acceptance into the Council, and again yesterday, in a private meeting to discuss the upcoming emergency session. Neither meeting had been particularly warm, but both representatives had recognized something in each other. A pragmatic approach to survival, a directness that their Council colleagues seemed to lack, and most importantly, a shared understanding of what it meant to evolve in an environment that constantly tried to kill you. They weren't friends, but they were perhaps the closest thing to allies either could find in this gathering of Garden World species. High Commissioner Phalar ascended to the central podium, his robes now glowing with ceremonial light. The chamber quieted immediately. "Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice amplified throughout the hall. "We gather today to address a matter of growing concern to all civilized worlds. For the past 3 cycles, we have detected unusual activity in the region designated as the Uncharted Expanse. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing a region of space at the edge of Council territory. A vast area of unusual stellar phenomena, radiation storms, and gravitational anomalies that had resisted standard exploration methods. Our survey vessels have reported increasingly troubling data," Phalar continued. "Most concerning is the complete disappearance of 3 research ships sent to investigate unusual energy signatures. The latest vessel, the Celestial Seeker, was our most advanced research platform with significant defensive capabilities and a crew of 83. The holographic display shifted to show the specifications of the missing vessel, a sleek, elegant ship that emphasized scientific equipment but also carried substantial shielding. We have convened this special session to determine an appropriate course of action. The Council Exploration Committee recommends the formation of a specialized investigative commission to analyze the available data and potentially authorize the deployment of an enhanced research vessel with additional defensive measures." Vance fought to keep her expression neutral. Formation of a committee to decide whether to send another ship that would likely also disappear. The Galactic Council's idea of decisive action. She glanced at Forlag, who remained completely still, his scaled face unreadable to most, though Vance thought she detected a subtle tightening around his eyes that might indicate similar thoughts. "We will now open the floor for statements," Phalar announced. "As is customary in matters affecting unexplored territories, we invite input from all member species." Several representatives rose to speak. The Trill Confederation expressed concern and offered additional sensor platforms. The Melosian Union suggested establishment of a quarantine boundary. The Arcturus Collective proposed more powerful automated probes. None addressed what seemed obvious to Vance, that something was hunting Council ships. Finally, Phalar gestured toward the human delegation. "We recognize Ambassador Ilera Vance of Earth." Vance stood and approached the central platform. She carried no notes, no prepared statement. As she took her position, she surveyed the assembled representatives, noting the mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and in some cases, thinly veiled disdain. "Esteemed members of the Council," she began, her voice clear and direct. "I've reviewed the data from the missing ships, including the partial transmission received from the Celestial Seeker before its disappearance." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a fragmentary data stream. Information that had been included in the briefing materials, but that no previous speaker had directly referenced. "This isn't a natural phenomenon," Vance stated flatly. "The pattern of disappearances, the final transmission fragments, and the energy signatures all point to a deliberate actor, an intelligent predator." A ripple of discomfort moved through the assembly. "Ambassador," interrupted Phalar, "that is speculation beyond the current evidence." "With respect, High Commissioner, it is the most logical conclusion based on the evidence," Vance countered. "The final transmission from the Celestial Seeker shows power fluctuations consistent with external technological interference, not natural phenomena. The ship's trajectory changed moments before communication was lost, a course correction that appears designed to bring it closer to the energy signature it was investigating." She tapped a control, and the display zoomed in on a particular section of data. "This isn't a research vessel being destroyed by a stellar event or radiation storm. This is a predator luring prey into a trap." The discomfort in the chamber intensified, with several delegates exchanging troubled glances. "Humans evolved on a world where we were neither the fastest nor the strongest species," Vance continued. "We survived by recognizing patterns, particularly patterns of predatory behavior. What we're seeing here matches hunting tactics we've observed in apex predators across multiple ecosystems." She looked directly at Phalar. "Forming a committee while we send another, slightly better equipped ship to be hunted is not a solution. It's offering up more victims." Another murmur swept through the chamber, this one carrying tones of shock at her bluntness. "What Earth proposes is an immediate defensive posture and the deployment of a specialized reconnaissance mission designed specifically to gather intelligence on this threat without becoming prey. We need to know what we're dealing with before we can effectively counter it." As Vance returned to her seat, the chamber remained unusually quiet. The directness of her assessment had clearly unsettled many. "We recognize Warrior Scholar Forlag of the Cthar Dominion," Phalar announced, his voice slightly less composed than before. Forlag rose to his full height and moved to the central platform. Where Vance had been direct but diplomatic, Forlag's presence alone seemed to intensify the tension in the room. The Cthar made no attempt to soften his fearsome appearance or modulate his deep, rumbling voice. "The human assessment is correct," he began without preamble. "The pattern indicates a hunting strategy similar to the silicon-based apex predators of Cthar Prime's lava fields." He manipulated the display controls, bringing up new visualizations of the missing ship's last known positions and the surrounding space. "Here and here," he indicated with clawed fingers, "the energy signatures serve as bait. They mimic radiation patterns that would attract curious researchers. Once a target approaches to investigate, the trap closes." Forlag's reptilian eyes swept across the chamber. "On our world, the Firestalkers use heat signatures to lure prey towards seemingly safe passages through lava flows. When the prey is committed to the path, the stalkers emerge from hiding and cut off escape routes." He zoomed the display out to show the larger region. "This is not random. The disappearances create a pattern of increasing range from the original anomaly. The predator is expanding its territory, testing boundaries, learning." A delegate from one of the elder species rose partially from his seat. "This is mere conjecture based on primitive survival instincts," he protested. "We cannot allow policy to be driven by such Barbaric perspectives. Forlag turned his gaze to the speaker, who visibly recoiled. The Cthar evolved in an environment where failure to recognize threats meant extinction, Forlag said, his tone unchanged. Those who dismissed barbaric perspectives did not survive to reproduce. He turned back to the display. If this entity follows predatory logic, standard research vessels will continue to be taken. Increased defensive capabilities will simply encourage it to develop more effective hunting techniques. Forlag highlighted a specific region within the uncharted expanse. The Cthar Dominion proposes a targeted intelligence-gathering mission using unconventional methods. We must know the predator before we can fight it or avoid it. What unconventional methods do you suggest? Phalar asked, his discomfort evident. Controlled bait, Forlag replied matter-of-factly. A vessel designed to attract attention, equipped with specialized sensors and escape systems. When the predator attacks, the ship gathers data on its methods and capabilities, then withdraws before capture can occur. You propose to deliberately provoke this entity, gasped a Melosian representative. I propose to study it without becoming its prey, Forlag corrected. On Cthar Prime, we test unknown predators with expendable resources to learn their capabilities before confronting them. As Forlag returned to his position, absolute silence fell over the chamber. The Cthar's cold, analytical approach to survival, so natural to him, had horrified many of the assembled delegates. Phalar seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Finally, he cleared his throat. We thank the representatives for their input. The council will now adjourn to private chambers to deliberate on the appropriate course of action. As the delegates filed out, a noticeable space formed around Vance and Forlag. The two Deathworlders stood side by side, watching the others leave. I think we scared them, Vance murmured. Good, Forlag replied. Fear promotes caution. They need more of both. In the private deliberation chamber, chaos erupted the moment the doors sealed. Absolutely unacceptable, exclaimed Councillor Nerith of the Melosian Union, his delicate fins fluttering in agitation. Their proposals violate every principle of peaceful exploration the Council stands for. They speak of baiting predators and hunting tactics as if we were still primitive beings fighting for survival, agreed another delegate. Phalar raised his hands for quiet. We must consider all perspectives, however uncomfortable they may be. Their perspectives are shaped by violent worlds that bear no resemblance to civilized space, Nerith countered. Must we allow their barbarism to infect our protocols? Ziptic, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward hesitantly. If I may, High Commissioner, while their methods seem extreme, their analysis of the data appears sound. The disappearances do follow a pattern consistent with deliberate action rather than natural phenomena. Are you defending them, liaison? Asked an elder Eldorian counselor, surprise evident in his tone. I am merely suggesting that we consider the substance of their assessment, even if we reject their proposed methods, Ziptic replied, his antennae lowering slightly under the scrutiny. Phalar paced slowly around the central table. We face a difficult choice. Our standard procedures have failed to resolve this situation. 3 ships and their crews are already lost. So we sacrifice another ship as bait? Nerith asked incredulously. Not necessarily in the manner that Cthar suggested, Phalar replied. But perhaps a more cautious version of their approach has merit. The debate continued for hours, with factions forming and reforming as various proposals were considered and discarded. Eventually, a compromise began to take shape, one that acknowledged the threat while maintaining council protocols. Meanwhile, Vance and Forlag had retreated to a small antechamber assigned to them. Despite being technically separate delegations, neither saw value in maintaining distance from the only other person in the council who shared their perspective. They'll deliberate until another ship disappears, Vance said, pacing the room with barely contained frustration. Forlag stood motionless by the window, looking out at the spectacular view of the council homeworld's capital city. They cannot comprehend immediate danger. Their evolutionary history lacks the appropriate reference points. Vance stopped pacing and studied the Cthar. Your world, it's primarily volcanic, isn't it? Forelag turned slightly. Yes, 87% active volcanic regions. The rest is temporary solid ground between eruption cycles. And still you built a civilization, developed technology, reached the stars. As did humans, on a world with extreme climate variations, tectonic instability, and biological hazards, Forelag observed. Adversity drives adaptation and shapes perspective, Vance added. She hesitated, then asked, those scars, the major ones on your shoulder and across your chest, predators? Forelag's scaled hand moved to touch the prominent scar tissue. The shoulder, yes. Magma Drake during a coming-of-age hunt. The chest was from a rival during territorial challenge. He studied her in return. You have similar experiences. Different marks. Vance nodded. Rockslide while mountain climbing when I was 20. Combat injury during the Mars colony conflict. We wear our histories differently, but we carry them just the same. The council species do not understand this, Forelag said. They evolve in environments of abundance and stability. They believe peace is the natural state of existence. While we know better, Vance replied quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of Ziptic, whose nervous energy seemed even more pronounced than before. The council has reached a decision, he announced. Your presence is requested in the Grand Hall. Upon their return to the chamber, Vance immediately noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The earlier diplomatic politeness had been replaced with something closer to wary respect, though the underlying fear remained. Phalar stood at the central podium, his expression solemn. After careful deliberation, the council has formulated a response to the situation in the uncharted expanse. In light of the unique perspectives offered by our newest members, we have authorized a specialized reconnaissance mission. Holographic displays activated, showing the specifications for a small, fast vessel with enhanced sensor packages and defensive systems. This ship will be tasked with gathering detailed information about the anomalies and any potential entities responsible for the disappearances. It will maintain a safe distance from known danger zones and retreat at the first sign of hostile action. Vance and Forelag exchanged glances. It was a half measure at best, still treating the threat as a phenomenon to be studied rather than a predator to be understood. Additionally, Phalar continued, with visible reluctance, given their particular expertise in survival scenarios. Ambassador Vance and Warrior Scholar Forelag are invited to join the mission as special advisors. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Placing Deathworlders on a council ship was unprecedented. The mission will be under overall council authority, with Liaison Ziptic serving as the official council representative, Phalar added hastily. Departure is scheduled for tomorrow's first light. As the session concluded, delegates approached Vance and Forelag with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Most offered formal wishes for a successful mission, though few seemed entirely comfortable in their presence. When they were relatively alone again, Forelag spoke quietly to Vance. They did not accept our recommendations. This ship is not designed to gather the intelligence we need. No, Vance agreed, but we'll be on board. And that changes the equation considerably. Forelag's scaled face shifted into what Vance was beginning to recognize as his version of a smile, a subtle arrangement of features that would appear merely threatening to most observers. Indeed, Icthar replied, adaptation is what Deathworlders do best. The reconnaissance vessel Stellar Observer was significantly smaller than the previous ships lost to the uncharted expanse. Built for speed and maneuverability rather than extended research capability, it carried a crew of only 20, including the special advisors and council observers. Captain Navari of the Trill Confederation, an experienced explorer with a reputation for caution, had been selected to command the mission. As the ship prepared for departure, he called a briefing in the main conference room. Our instructions are clear, he explained, displaying the official mission parameters. We are to maintain a minimum safe distance from the anomalous energy signatures, conduct passive scans only, and retreat immediately if we detect any unusual activity. Vance, sitting beside Forlag and across from a visibly nervous Ziptic, studied the cautious approach vectors laid out in the mission plan. They would barely get close enough to gather any useful data. "Captain," she said, "with respect, these parameters severely limit our ability to determine what happened to the previous vessels." Captain Navarri's expression tightened slightly. "The parameters were established by the Council after considerable debate, Ambassador. They reflect a balance between gathering information and ensuring crew safety. They reflect fear without understanding," Forlag stated flatly. "The Predator cannot be studied from such distances." Navarri looked uncomfortable. "These are our orders, warrior scholar. We're not authorized to deviate from them." "Then the mission will fail," Forlag replied simply. "And another ship will be sent. And another, until the Predator has consumed enough resources to expand its territory to populate its systems." The bluntness of the statement created an uncomfortable silence in the room. Ziptic's antennae quivered anxiously. Perhaps there is room for some flexibility within the parameters? As long as safety remains the priority, Vance seized the opening. "Captain Navarri, what if we developed a modified approach that honors the spirit of the Council's caution while allowing us to gather more meaningful data?" After some discussion, a compromise was reached. The Stellar Observer would follow the Council's approach vectors, but Vance and Forlag would be permitted to establish a secondary observation plan using the ship's auxiliary sensors and probes, as long as these additional measures didn't risk the ship itself. As they entered the outer regions of the uncharted expanse, the crew experienced their first taste of the area's hazards. Radiation levels fluctuated unpredictably, and gravitational anomalies required constant course corrections. "Fascinating environment," Forlag observed from his position at a science station. "Similar to the crystalline wastes on Cthar Prime. Unstable, but following complex patterns." "You sound almost appreciative," Vance noted, working beside him to reconfigure the sensor array. "Dangerous environments have their own beauty," the Cthar replied. "They demand respect and adaptation. They create strength." Captain Navarri approached their station, reviewing their work with a mixture of professional interest and personal wariness. "We're approaching the designated observation point. The energy signature that attracted the Celestial Seeker is approximately 3 light minutes from our position. Too far for detailed analysis," Forlag said immediately. "But within range of our modified probe," Vance added, bringing up the specifications of a small reconnaissance drone they had prepared. "If we launch now, we can gather preliminary data while maintaining our distance." Navarri hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed with the probe launch, but maintain it under tight control." The drone shot away from the Stellar Observer, accelerating toward the distant energy signature. As it approached, the data it transmitted became increasingly intriguing. "These readings," Vance murmured, analyzing the incoming information. "They're not consistent with any natural phenomenon in Council records." "Artificial," Forlag agreed, "but not technological in the conventional sense. More organic in its structure." Ziptic had joined them, his scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming his nervousness. Could it be a new form of life? Something that evolved in this unusual environment? "Possibly," Vance replied, "or something that adapted to it." Either way, her sentence was cut short as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Energy surge detected," called out the sensor officer. "Something's approaching the probe at high speed." On the main view screen, they watched as a swarm of small, metallic objects converged on their drone. The image from the probe's camera showed a brief glimpse of what looked like mechanical insects before the transmission abruptly ended. "Probe lost," reported the officer. "Multiple objects have changed course," announced another crew member, their voice rising in pitch. "They appear to be heading in our direction." Captain Navarri straightened. "Initiate retreat protocol. Take us out of the expanse immediately." "They're accelerating," reported the sensor officer. "Estimated interception in 7 minutes." "Our engines are at maximum," responded the navigator. "We cannot outrun them." Vance and Forlag exchanged glances, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "Captain," Vance said urgently, We need to change tactics. Running straight away makes us predictable prey. What do you suggest, Ambassador? Navari asked, strain evident in his voice. The asteroid field at bearing 217, Forlag said immediately, pointing to a dense cluster on the navigational display. Complex environment. Limits their swarming advantage. That's counter to our retreat vector, Navari protested. Survival often is, Vance replied grimly. We need to outthink them, not outrun them. After a moment's hesitation, Navari nodded. New course. Take us into the asteroid field. The stellar observer banked sharply, accelerating toward the dense cluster of space rocks. Behind them, the swarm adjusted course, still gaining. They're adapting to our change in direction, reported the sensor officer. Interception now in 6 minutes. We bought some time, but not enough, Vance said, studying the tactical display. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Forlag had moved to another console, analyzing the limited data they had gathered. The probe's final transmissions showed biological-mechanical hybrids, colony organisms with both organic and synthetic components. Like insects with technology, Vance mused, or technology that evolved organic components. Speculation can wait, Navari interrupted. We need a defensive strategy now. Forlag looked up from his console. On Cthar Prime, swarm predators have 2 weaknesses. They coordinate through central nodes, and they cannot process multiple threats simultaneously. So we need to confuse them, Vance concluded. Captain, do we have mining charges aboard? Anything that could create a dispersed energy field. We have atmospheric sampling charges that could be modified, offered the ship's engineer. And the ship's emergency shuttle, added Ziptic, surprising everyone. It could be programmed for autonomous operation. A plan quickly took shape. As they entered the asteroid field, the Stellar Observer released its modified charges at strategic points, creating a pattern of energy signatures similar to the ship itself. Simultaneously, the emergency shuttle was launched on a different vector, its systems rigged to emit heightened energy readings. The pursuing swarm, confronted with multiple potential targets in a chaotic environment, divided its forces. The main group pursued the shuttle, while smaller contingents investigated the energy charges. It's working, Vance observed as they monitored the tactical situation. They're splitting up. Not for long, Forlag cautioned. This tactic buys time, not victory. He was proven correct moments later when the swarm units investigating the charges quickly recognized the deception and rejoined the main pursuit. However, the diversion had allowed the Stellar Observer to navigate deeper into the asteroid field and establish a temporary hiding position in the shadow of a larger rock. We have perhaps 3 minutes before they locate us again, Forlag stated. Long enough to gather crucial data, Vance replied, working rapidly at her console. The ship's sensors, now calibrated based on their brief encounter, were collecting detailed information on the swarm's composition and behavior patterns. They're hunting by energy signatures, she noted, targeting power emissions, particularly from our propulsion and communication systems. Can we mask our emissions? Asked Navari. Not completely, replied the engineer, but we could alter their pattern to appear less like a starship. Do it, ordered the captain. As the engineer worked to reconfigure their systems, Forlag made an observation. Their pursuit pattern follows efficiency algorithms. They take the most direct route to intercept, even through the asteroid field. That could be exploited, Vance said thoughtfully. Captain, if we plotted a course through the densest part of the field, one that requires complex navigational adjustments, they might follow a more direct route and encounter obstacles they can't avoid. Navari considered this a dangerous gambit. We would be at risk as well. Your navigator has biological intuition and judgment, Forlag pointed out. Their algorithms do not appear to account for environmental hazards, only target acquisition. The captain made his decision. Helm, plot a course through the densest section. Engineering, mask our emissions as much as possible. The Stellar Observer began a perilous journey through the heart of the asteroid field, making constant course adjustments that no algorithm would consider efficient. Behind them, The swarm reformed and pursued, but just as Forlag had predicted, they took more direct routes, resulting in numerous collisions with asteroids that damaged or destroyed individual units. "It's working," Ziptic observed, his antennae extended in excitement rather than fear for the first time since the mission began. "Their numbers are diminishing, but not quickly enough," Vance said, checking the distance calculations. "They'll still intercept us before we clear the field." Forlag had been silent for several moments, studying the swarm's behavior patterns. Now he spoke. "The damaged units are being consumed by the others. They salvage components to repair and strengthen the remaining units. Cannibalism as a survival strategy," Vance noted. "Efficient, if disturbing. It suggests a potential tactic," Forlag continued. "If we could damage a significant portion of a swarm simultaneously, the remaining units would prioritize salvage over pursuit. The shuttle," Vance realized, "it's still drawing away part of the swarm. If we detonated its power core..." Captain Navari looked troubled. "That's Council property, Ambassador." "With respect, Captain, so is this ship and all our lives," Vance replied firmly. After a brief internal struggle, Navari nodded. "Make it happen." The shuttle, now far enough from the stellar observer to pose no danger, was remotely programmed to initiate a core overload. When the pursuing swarm units converged on it, the resulting explosion destroyed or damaged a substantial portion of them. As Forlag had predicted, the remaining units immediately turned their attention to salvaging their damaged companions rather than continuing pursuit. "Our path is clear," announced the navigator. "We can exit the asteroid field and reach safe FTL jump distance in approximately 12 minutes. "Make it happen," Navari ordered, relief evident in his voice. As the stellar observer made its escape, Vance and Forlag continued to analyze the data they had gathered, working in perfect synchronization. By the time they reached Council space, they had compiled a comprehensive preliminary report on what they now called the Silent Harvesters, a techno-organic collective that appeared to feed on both energy and technology, incorporating what they consumed into their own structure. The Council representatives waiting at the rendezvous point were initially relieved at their return, then horrified as they reviewed the mission recordings. The survival tactics employed by the Stellar Observer, using Council equipment as bait, deliberately leading enemies into hazardous conditions, the calculated sacrifice of the shuttle, violated numerous protocols. "These methods are concerning," stated Counselor Nareth during the debriefing. "They suggest a disturbing tendency toward violence and destruction." Vance maintained her diplomatic composure. "With respect, Counselor, they suggest a commitment to survival. Every action taken was necessary to preserve the ship and crew while gathering the intelligence we were sent to obtain." "The Cthar concurs," Forlag added. "The mission parameters became irrelevant once contact was established. Adaptation was required." "What troubles us," said another Council representative, "is how quickly and naturally you both turned to these methods. There was no consideration of peaceful contact, no attempt at communication." "Would you attempt communication with a lava flow?" Forlag asked bluntly. "The Harvesters are no more interested in dialogue than any other predator sensing prey." Ziptic, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "If I may, Counselors, having witnessed events firsthand, I must emphasize that without the interventions of Ambassador Vance and Warrior Scholar Forlag, we would not have returned. Their understanding of predatory behavior saved our lives. The uncharacteristic assertiveness from the normally timid liaison created a moment of surprised silence. Phalar, who had been observing the debriefing with growing concern, finally spoke. "The Council acknowledges the successful return of the Stellar Observer and the valuable intelligence gathered. We will need time to analyze this information and determine appropriate next steps." He glanced at Vance and Forlag with an expression that mixed reluctance and necessity. "We would request your continued involvement in formulating a response to this threat, given your unique perspectives." Later, as they left the Council chambers, Vance and Forlag found themselves walking side by side down the ornate corridor, isolated in a bubble of space as other delegates maintained their distance. "They're more afraid of us now than before," Vance observed quietly. Yes, Forlag agreed. But they also need us more than before. A complicated position to be in, Vance mused. Feared and needed simultaneously. It is the natural state of apex predators, Forlag replied. To be respected and avoided, yet essential to the ecosystem. They paused at a viewing window that overlooked the council capital skyline. A sprawling metropolis of elegant spires and swooping arches, beautiful but utterly impractical by the standards of either Earth or Cathar Prime, where buildings had to withstand earthquakes, extreme weather, or volcanic activity. They've created paradise, Vance said, gesturing toward the view. And now they're terrified it might be threatened. Paradise is an illusion, Forlag stated. The universe does not permit it indefinitely. Vance turned to face the Cathar warrior. They'll form another committee, debate endlessly about how to respond. While the harvesters continue to expand their territory, Forlag added, learning, adapting, consuming. We can't let that happen, Vance said firmly. Earth's colonies in the Arcturus sector are too close to the expanse. If the harvesters advance in that direction, the Cathar mining operations in the Helios cluster would also be at risk, Forlag acknowledged. Our interests align. A silent understanding passed between them. Their respective governments would not wait for council consensus. Preparations would already be underway for more direct approaches to the threat. Ambassador Vance? Varioshola Forlak. Ziptik's voice interrupted their moment of silent communication. The small Xyler approached them, his movements less nervous than before. The council has scheduled an emergency session for tomorrow morning to discuss defensive strategies based on your findings. Thank you, Liaison Ziptik, Vance replied with a small smile. We'll be prepared. After Ziptik departed, Forlag studied Vance. The small one has changed. The experience has hardened him. Exposure to real danger tends to do that, Vance agreed. He might become an ally within the council structure. Useful, Forlag acknowledged, but not sufficient. No, Vance agreed. For what comes next, we'll need more than allies. We'll need action. The emergency session the following morning began in the smaller council chamber, a more functional space used for urgent matters. Vance noted the practical choice with approval. Perhaps the council was beginning to prioritize function over form, if only slightly. High Commissioner Phalar called the session to order, his usually melodious voice carrying a new edge of urgency. Representatives of the council, we face an unprecedented situation. The entity discovered in the uncharted expanse represents a direct threat to council security. Holographic displays activated, showing the detailed analysis Vance and Forlag had compiled. The images of the swarm-like harvesters, with their unsettling blend of mechanical and organic components, caused visible discomfort among many delegates. Based on the intelligence gathered by the Stellar Observer mission, our scientific division has prepared a preliminary assessment, Phalar continued. Chief Scientist Lomar will present the findings. An elderly Melosian approached the central podium, data pad in hand. Our analysis confirms what Ambassador Vance and Warrior Scholar Forlag reported. The entities, which they have designated as silent harvesters, appear to be a collective organism with both biological and technological components. The display shifted to show a more detailed breakdown of the harvester's structure and behavior patterns. They operate as a coordinated swarm, exhibiting both predatory hunting tactics and technological salvage capabilities. They appear to consume energy and technology, incorporating compatible elements into their own structure. Most concerning is evidence of rapid adaptation. They quickly analyze and counter defensive measures. The chief scientist looked up from his data pad, his expression grave. Based on their expansion pattern and resource consumption rate, we estimate they could reach inhabited council systems within 2 standard cycles. A ripple of alarm spread through the chamber. 2 cycles, roughly equivalent to Earth years, was a heartbeat in council timescales, where planning typically occurred over decades or centuries. The scientific division recommends immediate establishment of long-range detection systems at all approaches to council space from the expanse and development of defensive protocols for all civilian and commercial vessels operating in adjacent sectors, Lomar concluded. Phalar nodded solemnly. Thank you, Chief Scientist. The Council will now hear proposals for response strategies. Several representatives offered variations on defensive postures, early warning systems, protected travel corridors, reinforced patrol vessels, all focused on detecting and avoiding the harvesters rather than directly confronting them. When it was their turn to speak, Vance and Forlag approached the podium together, a deliberate show of unity that did not go unnoticed. Honorable representatives, Vance began, the measures proposed so far have merit as initial precautions. However, they address symptoms rather than the underlying problem. The harvesters are expanding their territory. Detection and avoidance only delays the inevitable confrontation. She gestured to the display, which now showed a projection of harvester expansion based on current data. Our analysis suggests they will continue to grow, consuming resources and becoming more sophisticated with each encounter. Defensive measures alone will not suffice. Forlag steppet forward. The Kthar have faced similar threats in our evolutionary history. When a predator threatens territory essential for survival, there are only two viable responses: permanent relocation or elimination of the threat. His blunt statement created an uncomfortable stir among the delegates. Since the Council has no apparent plans to abandon multiple star systems, Forlag continued, unperturbed, elimination is the only logical option. You propose war against these entities? Asked Councillor Nerith, aghast. We propose survival, Vance corrected firmly. The harvesters have already demonstrated hostile intent. They've destroyed Council vessels and shown no interest in communication. But direct military action is contrary to Council principles, argued another representative. We have maintained peace for millennia through diplomacy and mutual understanding. You cannot negotiate with a wildfire, Forlag stated flatly. You either extinguish it or watch it consume everything in its path. The chamber erupted into heated debate. For many Council species, the concept of direct conflict on this scale was almost incomprehensible. Their historical and evolutionary experience simply hadn't prepared them for it. Amidst the growing chaos, a small but clear voice cut through. They are right. Heads turned in surprise to see Ziptic standing at his liaison station, antennae fully extended in a posture of determination. Liaison Ziptic, this is most irregular, began Phalar. Forgive me, High Commissioner, Ziptic interrupted, a shocking breach of protocol that silenced the room through sheer unexpectedness. But I was there. I saw these creatures. I witnessed how they hunt, how they think. He stepped forward, seemingly drawing courage from the surprised attention. I have served the Council for 20 cycles, always believing in our principles of peace and diplomatic resolution. But what I saw in the expanse... He paused, antennae quivering slightly. There can be no diplomacy with the harvesters. They do not see us as equals to negotiate with. They see us as resources to consume. The liaison speaks truth, Forlag rumbled in support. Furthermore, Ziptic continued, his voice growing stronger without the unconventional tactics employed by Ambassador Vance and Warrior Scholar Forlag. None of us would have returned to deliver this warning. Their methods may disturb us, but they are effective against threats our traditional approaches cannot address. The chamber fell silent as the Council members absorbed this unexpected testimony from one of their own. Phalar finally broke the silence. What precisely are you suggesting, liaison? Ziptic straightened to his full height, still quite small, but somehow more imposing than before. I suggest the Council acknowledge the necessity of learning from our Deathworlder colleagues. Their evolutionary history has prepared them for conflicts we have been fortunate enough to avoid. We need their expertise. Vance seized the moment. Earth proposes a joint task force to address the harvester threat directly, combining Council resources with human and Kthar tactical expertise. The Kthar Dominion supports this proposal, Forlag added immediately. The debate that followed was intense but focused. Even the most peace-oriented delegates could not ignore the evidence or Ziptic's passionate testimony. Gradually, a consensus began to form, not enthusiastic agreement, but reluctant acceptance of necessity. By the session's end, the Council had authorized the formation of a specialized joint operation to contain and potentially neutralize the Harvester threat. Command structure would be shared between Council, Human, and Cthar leadership, with Vance, Forlag, and, somewhat surprisingly, Ziptic named as primary coordinators. As the delegates filed out, many still visibly unsettled by the unprecedented decision to authorize direct action, Phalar approached Vance and Forlag privately. "I must confess," he said quietly, "that when your species joined the Council, many of us viewed it as a diplomatic courtesy rather than a true integration. Your world seems so fundamentally incompatible with our vision of civilized space." He looked between them, his ancient eyes reflecting complex emotions. "We feared your influence might disrupt millennia of peaceful progress. Now it seems that disruption may be our salvation. It is difficult to reconcile." "High Commissioner," Vance replied diplomatically, "humanity doesn't wish to change the Council's peaceful nature. We value what you've built here, a cooperative alliance that has prevented countless conflicts. That's worth preserving. But peace requires strength to defend it," Forlag added. "On Cthar Prime, the most stable territories are those protected by the most formidable defenders. Peace through strength is not a contradiction." Phalar considered this. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your perspective that we have forgotten over the millennia. Comfort can breed complacency." He straightened, his ceremonial robes shifting with the movement. "I will support your joint operation, though many in the Council remain uncomfortable with your methods." "We understand, High Commissioner," Vance assured him, "and we don't take the responsibility lightly." After Phalar departed, Vance, Forlag, and Ziptic remained behind to begin preliminary planning. The small Xyler seemed simultaneously exhausted and energized by his unexpected role in the day's events. "I still can't believe I spoke out like that," he chittered, antennae twitching in embarrassment. "It was completely improper." "It was necessary," Forlag stated simply. "And courageous," Vance added with a smile. "Sometimes protocol must yield to truth." Ziptic looked between them. "Before experiencing danger firsthand, I never understood your species. Your directness seemed crude, your focus on threats seemed paranoid. But now you've seen what we've always known," Vance said gently. "The universe doesn't care about politeness or protocol. Survival sometimes requires difficult choices. The Council will adapt," Forlag predicted, "or it will not survive. Evolution is universal." "Speaking of adaptation," Vance said, turning to the tactical display they'd begun to assemble, "we have substantial planning to do if this operation is going to succeed." Over the following days, as word spread throughout the Council about the Harvester threat and the unprecedented joint operation being assembled to confront it, attitudes toward the Deathworlders began to shift. Fear remained, but it was increasingly tempered with a reluctant respect. Council species who had previously avoided contact now sought consultation on defensive measures for their worlds and shipping lanes. The operation itself took shape rapidly, combining Council resources with human ingenuity and Cthar tactical experience. A specialized fleet was assembled, Council vessels retrofitted with hybrid technology developed through human-Cathar collaboration, designed specifically to counter the Harvester's unique capabilities. 3 weeks after the emergency session, the joint fleet prepared to depart for the edge of the expanse. An unofficial gathering had formed in the Grand Hall. Representatives from across the Council had come to witness the formal launch of the operation. Vance stood with Forlag and Ziptic near the command platform, where the final reports were being processed before departure. They had all changed in subtle ways over the past weeks. Vance's diplomatic polish had acquired a harder edge. Forlag had developed an unexpected patience for explaining tactical concepts to beings with no evolutionary concept of predation. And Ziptic had grown into his new role with surprising confidence, his earlier nervousness replaced by focused determination. "Final preparations are complete," reported a human tactical officer. "All ships report ready status." The Cthar contingent confirms readiness, added a scaled warrior, standing at attention beside Forlag. Phalar approached the command platform. As High Commissioner, it was his duty to formally authorize the mission's launch. The Grand Hall quieted as he prepared to speak. Representatives of the Council, members of the joint operation, he began, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. Today marks an unprecedented moment in our shared history. For millennia, the Galactic Council has maintained peace through dialogue, understanding, and cooperation. He paused, looking directly at Vance and Forlag. Recent events have taught us that while these principles remain our foundation, there are threats that cannot be addressed through traditional means alone. Today, we authorize this operation not as an abandonment of our peaceful ideals, but as a necessary defense of them. The formal authorization proceeded with traditional council ceremony, though Vance noted it had been streamlined considerably compared to previous proceedings. Another small adaptation, she thought, prioritizing function over form when urgency required it. As the ceremony concluded and the operational teams prepared to board their transport to the fleet, a delegation of council representatives approached them. "Ambassador Vance, warrior scholar Forlag," said one, an elder Trill whose name Vance recalled as Merilith. "We wish to, that is, the Trill Confederation wishes to acknowledge the debt we already owe you. Our colony in the Viridian sector would have been among the first in the Harvester's Path." Others added similar sentiments, formal, somewhat stilted, but sincere acknowledgments of the Deathworlders' contributions. Vance handled the diplomatic niceties while Forlag stood stoically beside her, offering occasional curt nods that passed for effusive gratitude by Cthar standards. When they finally boarded their transport, Ziptic accompanying them as the Council's official representative, Vance found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. 3 months ago, they could barely stand to be in the same room with us, she noted to Forlag as they watched the Council homeworld recede through the viewport. Now, they're thanking us for terrifying them. "Fear can be instructive," Forlag replied. "They feared us because we understood dangers they did not. Now, they begin to understand those dangers themselves. And yet they still fear us," Ziptic observed quietly. Forlag's scaled face shifted into his version of a smile. "As they should. We are predators by evolution, protectors by choice. Both aspects have value. The Council will never fully understand us," Vance said, "just as we will never fully understand their perspective. But perhaps we don't need complete understanding, just mutual respect." As their transport approached the assembled fleet, sunlight glinting off the hulls of Council, human, and Cthar vessels now united in common purpose, Vance felt a cautious optimism. The path ahead would be difficult, the threats substantial, but they had already achieved something unprecedented, forcing the Council to recognize that sometimes the universe required more than diplomatic protocols and committee decisions. Sometimes it required the particular skills that only evolve on worlds that try to kill you. Forlag must have been thinking along similar lines, because he spoke without prompting. On Cthar Prime, there is a saying, "The strongest alloys are forged in the hottest fires." Perhaps this crisis will forge a stronger Council. "I hope so," Vance replied, "because I suspect the Harvesters won't be the last threat to emerge from the darkness between stars." "Almost certainly not," Ziptic added with newfound pragmatism. "But when the next threat comes, perhaps we will be better prepared to face it. Together." As their transport docked with the command vessel, Vance and Forlag exchanged one final glance. A moment of perfect understanding between two beings from worlds that should have killed them, but instead had shaped them into exactly what the galaxy now needed. They had walked into a Council meeting and terrified everyone. Now, they would walk into battle and show exactly why that fear was justified, and why it might just save them all.